Well, Lacey, thank you so much for scheduling the time to come on today. We're getting we had a bit of a lull with new vendors applying for the Get to Know Your Wedding Pro podcast. I post all the time online. I say, it's 45 minutes via Zoom. You don't even have to come to my house anymore. That used to be the big turn off for people. So thank you for stepping up. A referral of Greg Louder, friend of the podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I am Lacey Larsen. I own Evergreen Weddings. I'm based up in Skagit and Whatcom counties. I literally live on the county line, so I feel like I can fairly claim both territories. But if I had to pick one, it would be Skagit. I was born and raised here, so big fan of the Valley. I launched Evergreen Weddings about three years ago. Gosh, COVID has made it seem like it's been a decade. Launched about 3 years ago, and it has just been a wild ride ever since because COVID really threw things for a loop, but it's absolutely my passion. I love it. I serve the couples of the Pacific Northwest. I do coordinating, creating, full service planning, the whole gamut. Travel all over. I don't just limit myself here because I love to travel. I love to see what the rest of the state and the other Northwestern states offer. So, yeah.
Yeah, the COVID thing really, we've had people on here that have bought venues right before COVID. We've had people that, have quit jobs right before COVID. I mean, it really is, It'll be, when I had just entered the news industry back in 2008, I just graduated college, and that was kind of the whole. And so it was interesting for a long time on the podcast. We would talk with, businesses that had gone through, 2008 and all of that. And now this will be like the next thing, right? To have, how has it been going for you? Did you feel like you were equipped to kind of handle this, whatever we want to call this last year or so now?
Man, I worked, I graduated college in 2014. And when I moved home, I had no idea what I wanted to do. It's not like being a wedding planner was my passion since day one. But I always loved the idea of being with people and being organized and just planning events in general. So when I graduated, I had a job for a couple years that I absolutely loved. It was work from home, but still really involved in the community and had a lot of responsibility. So I feel like those few years really equipped me for this shift of working from home. But then that job ended really abruptly because budget cuts. And then I started this new job at an insurance agency up in Whatcom County. And I hated it since day one. It was horrible. Like I got pinned to this desk 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. Couldn't go to the dentist without cringing about having to ask my boss if I could go. And so I started toying with ideas of how can I start a business? And my husband and I got married in 2018 and didn't have a wedding coordinator. And so that really showed me the importance of it. So then when I'm going through this crappy job, I decided to quit, and I knew I wanted to quit. I just didn't know when that was going to happen. And so I thought the best time would be to quit right in the middle of COVID, so that I could pursue this full time. And so I quit last June. And I feel like the combination between, like I said, the work from home job and then working in this much more professional, structured atmosphere, those two things really did equip me for transitioning into working from home for myself, running this business. And nothing can prepare you for COVID, right? We all thought it was going to be over in 4 weeks, but here we are a year later. And I feel it sounds so cliche and cheesy, but literally every day of 2020 taught me something new about COVID. And I feel like the last 3 months have probably been just big crash and burn learning moments. And so, yeah, it's been good. I feel like if we had to do it again, I'd handle it well.
No, learning on the fly, is so important. And it's so interesting where, we talk with a lot of people on here that have transitioned to full-time, are working through it, or some people aren't right and view the wedding stuff, as a part-time thing. But it's so interesting where, when you make it your full-time thing, that time that you open up by not having to do that balancing act, you really are able, the right people, are really able to fill that time, right, with what they're wanting to do versus what they're feeling like they have to do, right?
Totally. Oh, absolutely. And that's what has been so fun is that the hardest part about the first job out of college and then to this insurance job was going from having a lot of flexibility to kind of running things the way I wanted and paving new pathways for the, I mean, as a soccer club, so it wasn't a business, but the organization, and doing that, and then getting stuck behind this desk. It was like my creative juices couldn't go anywhere, and it just, like, I just had to conform to exactly what the handbook says. And so being able to go full time with this has just been awesome because it's like I can do whatever the heck I want, and it's really stressful, like a lot of pressure, but it's still so good because you learn as you go and you figure out what works, what doesn't work, what makes you happiest. It's been really good.
Yeah, and I mean, if nothing else, to good to come from everything we've gone through the last year, it is the empowering, the work from home, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
better utilizing the time that people just in general have spent centuries commuting and doing all these things, and now the idea that we could be you know a little bit more building your own schedule, I think would benefit everybody, right? But
Oh,
especially the entrepreneurs. We were someone was asking how old our dog was this weekend, and we've had her ever since I had quit, my job. So we've had her like 6 years, and I was like, I can't imagine going back to a desk and being chained. Uh,
okay.
it's a crazy thing that we get so used to, but then I do feel like you get to be much more productive. The right people building their own schedules.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a balance. My husband works at the hospital up in Whatcom, so he's on just a really sweet schedule of like a lot of days off at a time. And so even a bigger benefit of running things my way and doing it on my schedule is like I can work like the days that he's on and he's sleeping all day, work my butt off day to night the whole time, and then when he's off, like we get to go peace out for a few days to go camping or whatever. And so yeah, it's good. There's a lot of benefits to it. Not for the weak at heart, but there's a lot of benefits.
Where'd you go to college then? Up in Bellingham?
I went to a small school called Hillsdale College. It's do you know the Michigan mitten map? I guess I don't know how
Yeah,
it'll
yeah,
work
yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah.
video, but I'm like way down here, right next to Ohio. So went from one small town to another even smaller town. But it was good. It was really good.
Because you're from here.
I'm from here, born and raised, lived in Conway,
So
Mount Vernon High School.
Conway, yeah, I know Conway. Yeah, my good friend, they used to live up in right up by the hospital. Actually, up there, she did reception work there for a while. So what drew you to Michigan for school?
Ooh, not lazy anymore, but I was very lazy in high school. My sister actually went to Hillsdale, and when it came my time to start looking for colleges, I was like, don't know what I'm looking for, don't know what I want to do with my life. And it's so hard because you're surrounded by all these kids that are like, I'm going to be this and this and this, and you're like, ooh, can I like work at a store? You just don't know. And so I followed big sister's footsteps. I applied. It was the only college I applied to because, again, I just didn't know what I was looking for. But I liked the values of the school. I liked that it has I want to word it, a core curriculum, I guess, that you have to go through. So it's a lot of like U.S. Constitution, American history, American heritage, Western heritage, and I love history. And so being able to take all those classes from really well-renowned professors was exciting to me, and that's all I knew. So I went, and it was really hard. I almost transferred out. Definitely did not prepare myself well enough for the kind of studying I had to do, but I ended up joining a sorority, and it was a huge godsend because I went from like a 1.7 GPA to a 3.8 and then consistently stayed on dean's list. So sororities aren't all that bad. They can be good.
What'd you study over there at school?
I ended up majoring in speech and rhetoric studies. So a lot of people will be like, oh, so are you going to be a speech therapist? And no, I can't even say that. That's like the first time I've said speech therapist and I haven't messed it up. If I really wanted to take that major and like utilize it the way it should be, I would have gone to Washington, D.C. and written speeches for politicians. But
It's
here I am in Washington planning weddings.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it's so interesting how, just as a society, it's like, decide what you want to do at 20 years old or whatever, right? For
Oh
the
my
rest of
gosh.
your, and it doesn't, it's really hard. It's really hard how everything's set up that way, where you really have to. I think it's getting easier to pivot later on, right? As you've
Yeah.
shown, and I
Right.
think we can.
Right.
Um, we have different, stages of our lives. I have on our other wedding planning podcast. We're talking
Mhm.
about kind of divorce and transition coming up next week. I just recorded with Rebecca.
Okay.
Recorded the episode about that and talking about how we do go through different stages of life, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like, I look back at, the time I was in news, or I might look back in 10 years of the time I was in weddings, right? And we might, you might, but
Yeah.
it's so interesting how nowadays I do think it's way easier to pivot and
Totally.
make those changes, right? I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you fell into wedding planning now.
Yeah.
What I want to hear about where you guys got married in 18.
Oh, we got married at Hidden Meadows in Snohomish County. We loved, I mean, everything about it. It's a gorgeous venue, right? And so we loved the open air barn. We really wanted to have the vibe of just everything that you can't do in COVID right now, like mingle, don't sit down. Like we didn't want people plastered to their seats for 3 hours while we did toast and a dance and a cake cutting and a bouquet toss. And we wanted it to feel very free flowing. And we felt like that open air barn with the yard really accomplished that. We ended up actually doing our ceremony at Swans, or a chapel on Swans Hill, I think it's called. Dream come true. We got married in the middle of May, actually on Mother's Day. So like our moms were very excited. And it was, I think, like 85 degrees. It was like the freak hot day that we get in May up here. So it was like everything about it was perfect. It was so much fun. But like I mentioned earlier, I didn't get a day of coordinator. And so even to this day, I'm like, oh, God, there's still things that didn't happen or did happen that shouldn't have happened. And so that was my biggest learning moment, and just really reflecting on what that experience was like without a professional on your side.
It's so difficult. I've talked before on here, DJs and wedding planners, slash coordinators
Yeah.
are two of, and I mean, I'm sure every vendor would say whatever, but two of the hardest selling points for prospective clients because,
Yeah,
obviously lacking of a tangible product, right? And then,
totally.
I mean, I've been to plenty of weddings that didn't have a planner, right? And
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they
It's doable.
happened. Yeah, I mean they happened, right? I don't know if they were as successful as they could have been, right? So
Mhm.
it's such a thing. So what do you, when you're meeting with clients now, I assume on Zoom or whatever, but what is your, having been a bride that's gone through that, what do you say to them now? What is kind of your sales pitch for that?
Yeah. So I ended up writing a blog because earlier on when I was trying to come up with that sales pitch, I was like, okay, like how do you convince someone that a day of coordinator is necessary? Because, like you can drop $6,000 on a venue, but then like a $1,500 day of coordinator is like, oh, breaking the budget. And so they don't do it. And that's how I was. By the time I realized I needed one, they told me the price and I was like, yeah, I can't, like maxed out on the budget. And so I just Googled, like, why should I hire a day of coordinator? Just to see what the reasonings were out there. And there were always the same 3 to 5 reasons of, I can't even recite them because I should remember them, but
okay.
It felt so surfacey and just very obvious. And so a little while ago, I wrote a blog. It's 50 reasons why you should hire a day of coordinator. And a lot of it stems from 2 main things. I tell people you're investing so much time and money and energy and emotion into your wedding day. You could expect to show up on your wedding day and just have everything come together and everything work flawlessly, but it needs the glue. It needs the team leader. And so it's kind of an insurance plan, I guess. Like you're just guaranteeing that all of this stuff that you have put together for your big day is going to be handled by someone who knows how it should work, almost even better than you do, because they've gone through it and they've maybe even worked with those vendors before. And then another big selling point is family. A lot of people, including myself, will use a family member. Like I used my sister. She's like, oh, I'll be your day of coordinator. It'll be great. And I thought that was awesome, a great gift. But then when the day came, I never got to see her. I barely got to spend time with her because she was too busy trying to handle X, Y, and Z. And bless her heart, she's amazing. Even she had things fall through the cracks that she wasn't aware of because she didn't know what questions to ask and I didn't know what to relay to her. And so I tell people, if you're planning on a family member or a friend doing it, you have to think about what the day will look like for them. It's your celebration, but it's also their celebration in a sense too. So Aunt Shirley, cool. She's like planning the church potluck and like nephew's birthday party, but that's not a wedding. Aunt Shirley will also be casually drinking wine throughout the night, and she may forget to check her watch. Aunt Shirley has to be in family photos, so she will be needed elsewhere. If you don't have somebody who is strictly designated for you on your wedding day and your plans, you're going to have somebody who has obligations elsewhere. So those are kind of my two big selling points. It's an insurance policy for your plans and your money and your time, and it's also a gift to your family. Because with my day of coordinating, and a lot of coordinators do it, they'll show up and they'll do a lot of the setup. That frees up mom to go be with you. Like my mom, she didn't help me put my dress on because she was so busy setting up, and I hate that. That's like one of the things that I still cringe about. So yeah, do it for the family, do it for you, do it for the family.
Well, and also just it's so nice having someone that, as vendors, that we can ask questions of, right? That's
Yeah.
more of this in that role, right? And I think it's really interesting. I was thinking, I work with a lot of vendors, and like some photographers are like really, really chitty chatty, like all the time with the couple, like da, 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 da. And that's, and that's great, and that's fine. And we just had one last week, and they were really like, what do you think about all this kind of stuff? And that's, and I get
Like
that.
on the wedding day?
Yeah. And I get it. And it kind of ingratiates them and kind of builds that relationship. Like, I'd rather not bug them that much, the couple.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to, like, that's fine. And if that means, and I've shifted over the years, because I think I used to be that way where I would have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And now I like just being able to ask the planner, like, what do you think we should do about this? We had a thing, was it probably 2 years ago now with COVID, but we were at a venue up north. We were at that Mountain View Estate up in Lake Stevens, that kind of like the backyard that overlooks. Anyway, so they have this water feature up there, and it's like and it's so loud. And I remember sitting there and I was like, this is going to, the audio is going to be really bad, like whatever. And I was asking, I can't even tell you who their coordinator was. And I was like, here's the deal. Like, I don't want to go bug the bride about this. I don't want to bug the groom. Like, is this the most important thing? Anyway, but the fact that we could have a 20-minute discussion with the coordinator about this and not have to bug the couple, and that she was empowered enough to make those decisions. I'm
Absolutely.
like, and that's just one of a million things that are going to happen that day. And it's so, anyway, the older I get and the more I do this, I really like dealing with the professionals and not having to go bug someone that's emotionally charged, right? For better or worse.
Right. They're in the moment getting ready. And that's my biggest thing too, is I tell them, like, if you don't have a coordinator, if you don't have anyone in charge, guess who people are going to be coming to for answers? It's going to be you. You're going to be like sipping your mimosa, getting your lipstick put on, and you're not going to want to try and envision what it is they're explaining to you and how to, it can just be a mess. And so it is super helpful for a lot of the other professionals. And one of the biggest compliments I've received from a lot of the pros I've worked with is that I'm just incredibly hands-on. And I remember so my first year, I wasn't in business. It was my portfolio year. So I was really scrappy, buy, sell, trade pages. I'm like, who wants a free day of coordinator? Like, just trying to learn, build my portfolio. I ended up having 7 weddings that year, which was so fun. And they're still my good friends. But one of my girlfriends who was kind of helping me at the time, she goes, you go above and beyond. And like, I know that's just who you are, but you're going to get so burned out. You're going to like, it's not sustainable. You can't keep doing that. And that really bothered me. I don't know if you know any much about the Enneagram, but I'm a 2, which is all about like serving people and doing whatever you can to help. And so it irked me that I was being told that who I was wasn't going to be sustainable. And call me a rebel, but I kept with it. And so one thing that a lot of pros have told me is that I'm super hands-on, that I communicate way more than a lot of pros that they've worked with, because I see my role as the one that glues it all together. Like, you have this team, who's going to lead the team? And here I am, like, bringing everybody together into this cohesive vision. And maybe it is above and beyond, but it works. It works well. My clients love it. I love it. I love building relationships with people. So I don't know. I'm not changing anytime soon.
Well, and I've said it before on here. I mean, if nothing else, the last year or two, the importance of having a planner, someone that you can just that you're there with them to kind of go through
Yeah.
everything in a way that like a photographer isn't, a videographer, like we're not in that the same way at all, right?
Yeah, you have your lane, kind of.
Yeah, where and some of these, now maybe you got to move it to next year, and then you have lived with this couple now, right, for so long. It really has really set up that different dynamic of that relationship versus like even like if we move a wedding, I'm like, okay, I'll talk to you in 9 months, okay, whatever. But like now you as the planner, almost you gotta ride them along. The question I had, having been married recently, I always say I am, because we did weddings before we got married. I was a vendor when I got married. I felt like I was a better vendor having gone through the process, right? Now, where you, got married and kind of were starting at the same time, but having gone through that process, do you feel like what things have you learned from going through it yourself now that you want to help your clients with?
Okay, so one thing I'm currently working on is trying to figure out how to publish a book. I want to write a book, and I don't have a concrete title yet, but it's going to be something along the lines of like how to for dummies or whatever. But it's like how to be a bride. Because when I went through my wedding, and what I'm noticing with all my current brides, is there are certain things that like you just, most of the time, like, you haven't been a bride before. And so there are things that you don't realize are so important. And one thing in particular is like communication of expectations. So one thing that I'm constantly having to do like therapy sessions with my girls is like, hey, my maid of honor or my bridesmaids, they're not helpful. They aren't stepping up. And I always ask them, have you laid out your expectations for them? Like, do they know that you are expecting them to come sample all the cake with you? Like, are you expecting them to do week-long shopping trips for dresses? And they're like, oh no, I haven't. I'll try that. And so it's how to be a bride, how to work with your mother-in-law. Like, I'm sorry if she's listening right now. Like, one of the things that I regret the most is how I treated my mother-in-law. I don't know why, but I was a huge control freak. I'm like, no, I'm going to keep things like between me and my sister and my maid of honor. And that's it. And so I wasn't very inclusive. And so how you work with your mother-in-law, how to have the conversations about money and like, hey, mom and dad, are you paying or are you not? Like, it's okay if you're not, just need to know. And so just a lot of those things that you don't think about, or that like, I don't know, you just consider awkward. And so you avoid it, but like, you can't. Planning a wedding is different than everyday life. And speaking of everyday life, that's a huge other newsflash to a lot of people, is that life still happens when you're planning your wedding. We were engaged for 9 months. And in that time was when I lost my job, started a new job. My apartment flooded. We sold our childhood home of 30 years that my parents built by hand. So that was emotional. And then there was like another crap thing that happened, but it was just a really hard 9 months. And I'm trying to plan this wedding, and my whole bridal party lived out of state. And so it's kind of just helping people recognize the reality of what it means to plan a wedding, what it means to be a bride, how to set boundaries, how to include people, how to not be a control freak like Lacey. So I'm super thankful that I didn't try to pursue this before I got married, because I think that experience is so invaluable, and it's been really helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's tough. I am in a lot of like videographer groups, and there's a lot
Mm.
of men especially, but women too, but people that haven't been through the process, right? Aren't
Yeah,
married at all, right? And
yeah.
not that you can't be, a successful wedding vendor having not been married at all. I mean, that's
Oh yeah,
certainly not the
absolutely.
case. But I do think just with anything in life, having gone through it yourself, makes you more aware of
Yeah,
just certain
yeah.
stuff. And I always remember that this was years ago and it stuck with me. And there was this whole post in this, it's like a worldwide video, wedding videographers on Facebook
Hmm.
or whatever. And this guy was like, my contract says that they owe me the money, 3 weeks before the wedding. And it is Tuesday now of that week. And I am like, I'm not going to show up if I don't, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, do you know what the last couple weeks before you get married is like? There's a lot of things going on, right? And I used to think that way too. I remember one of our brides, Anna Brodea, we're still friends to this day, and she had paid whatever, and it was like after the wedding, but before the edit or something, and like
Got it.
her check bounced, right? And I was like, this is a scam, right? What is going on? All this kind of stuff, right? And I email her and she's like, oh my God, we have like 6 checks go out and we did the math wrong by
Oh
$200,
shoot.
whatever, right? It's all these life
Oh,
things. But if you haven't gone, now having been married, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally get
yeah.
how that would work at all. Cause we were writing like all these checks, like the night
I'll
before.
drop it once.
Yeah. And so it's really helpful. And I especially think as a planner, man or woman, having gone
Mhm,
through it,
mhm.
that you can, talk with your couples about, I think
Yeah.
um, is a really helpful thing. Cause like I said, I deal with photographers that have never been married and they're shooting it like a photo shoot and not like a wedding. And it's helpful. So.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It is. That's probably one of the main reasons why. So when I structure the timeline, I'll never forget. I was sitting at my photographer's house. We are kind of going over the last few details, and they were basically the stand-in day of coordinators. Um, we were going through the timeline, and it were like 3 days before the wedding, and it just occurred to me that I didn't like finalize some kind of detail with the gal that was doing our cupcakes, and I just burst into tears and I am sobbing like, oh, the cupcakes. Totally forgot that I was supposed to like give her final details, final guest count, like drop off time, and just a whole slew of things. And so I was really worked up about what the day was going to look like and how to make those logistics happen since we were doing it in 2 different locations. And I used to lead Young Life, and so I actually had 15 of my Young Life baby girls come to the wedding, which is really special and unique. And so I like put them in charge of a few things, which was awesome. But that timeline stressed me out so much before the wedding. And so how I structure it is like my goal is to have a rough draft pretty close to final timeline 2 months before the wedding. So then that way, like every vendor has it at least 4 to 5 weeks before. Then there's a buffer if anything has to change. But then that way, like all you have to worry about the last month is communicating to family when you got to show up for pictures. And it's, yeah, whatever I can do to alleviate that stress and make those last few weeks just feel oddly calm. That's my goal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm having flashbacks now. Yeah, that used to be the biggest concern for the weddings. I would, now it's like, can we even, breathe on each other during the wedding? I mean, it used to be, wanting the timeline, far enough in
Yeah.
advance and not having it. Uh, it's weird. Yeah. And working with a variety of that, we had a planner. I remember my other associate was shooting it. And my wife and I were actually out of town. One of our friends got married. And I remember because it was the day of the wedding and I was looking through the stuff just to see if there was anything to message Matt about. And I was like, oh my God, they have a planner. And I had never heard, and I knew this planner. And I was like, this is wild that we are going into this wedding today. And I have yet to hear from them in the 6 months, that we have been going along this journey.
Oh,
So yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be taken for granted is I guess my
yeah.
point is having that thoroughness and, just attention to detail. I mean, not all vendors are the same, across categories in
Yeah.
general, but
Yeah.
especially the
Yeah.
planners.
Yeah.
Um,
That's crazy.
yeah. So with Evergreen Weddings, do you what's your what do you not prefer, but what's your flair in terms of weddings that you like to do? It could be specialty. It could
Yeah.
just be ones you really like more than others. But
Yeah.
what do you view as kind of the weddings that you like to do the best?
Oh, that is a good question. Oh man, I've had such a range that I think, I mean, maybe it sounds really cliche. I love the weddings when the couple is just so laid back and they're like, let's meet and grab a beer, and they just trust me, and that I don't feel like I'm constantly like trying to convince them that like you hired me, so there's a level of trust and you should just continue to trust me. I Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about my ideal client, and maybe I'll get some flack for this if it ever gets in the wrong hands. But I really am starting to appreciate young professionals, even older professionals. Like I've had a few couples that are in their 50s, and those have been such fun weddings. And to this day, I'm still good friends with them. But I've had several weddings where the parents are just like really involved, and that's been a learning curve, and it's been challenging at times. So I've learned to structure my contract differently, and like making it clear that like this service is between me and the couple. And so just the young professionals that have a clear vision of what they want, and are just ready to get down and get it done. But then my dream is to just have somebody come to me and be like, here's my credit card and the budget. Go design it for me. I used to work at Pier 1, so anything like decor, colors, like cake stands, I love it. So that's my dream. But yeah, people who are just, they're like clear headed, they know what they want, and but are also just open to suggestions, just good and humble.
You've said a couple different times, I've had this client, they're still a good friend. I've had this other, I'm still friends. Do
Yeah.
you find that, it could be a mix of your personality and the way you work, whatever, but you do
Mhm.
maintain friendships a lot with your clients
Oh,
afterward?
yes. Oh, yeah. To me, and like there are some that like we leave on the wedding day and we're like, okay, bye, and like that was that, like, okay, whatever. But those that I worked really closely with, I'm trying to kind of go through like who booked what package, and like with day of coordinating, I really don't start working with them until about 3 months before. So I don't get a ton of time with them, but really those who have booked like full service planning, or even partial, like where you're spending more time together, it just, I don't know, it's just fun because I want people to show up to their consultations, whether it's in person or Zoom or whatever, and not make it feel like it's a business meeting. Like I want to just catch up and hear how they're doing, because a huge pillar of what I built this business on is really being an advocate for the couple, and you can't do that unless you know them. And so it's a benefit for me to just get to know like the weird quirks throughout their week. Like, oh, that's really stressful at work. Oh, you have a really stressful week before the what, whatever it is. I want to know about it, and it helps me know you. So then on the wedding day, if something comes up, like you were talking about, you don't want to have to go bother them. I want to feel like I know them well enough that I can say, oh yeah, so and so would hate it if I did this, so I'll do this instead. And so it's, I don't know. And I'm such a people person. Like I love people. So COVID has been horrible this year, but I see them as friends, and I see them as people I just truly care about, because your wedding day is so important. And I don't know, it naturally happens, and I love it. We'll keep in touch. I had a phone call. There was, gosh, who was? Oh yeah, last year, like months after the wedding, like we just call each other once a month just to catch up. It was awesome.
Yeah, it will be nice when we can move past all these other things going on, because I do feel like so much of the conversations we have now with our clients are about like, well, what if we have to cancel? What if we have to
Right.
do this? And it would get back to, like you said, just getting to know them, what are their wants, what are their likes and
Yeah.
dislikes when it comes to the wedding,
Right.
um, what do they want their day to feel like, or whatever those questions are
Totally.
we all used to ask before it was like, well, now tell me about your cancellation policy, so, right. But like, it feels like a foreign thing now. Like so much of the discussion for a year now, I mean, literally a
Yeah.
year now, has been like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And not
Yeah.
about like, tell me how you guys met. Oh, you're gonna
Right.
have your dog be involved. Okay, why'd you pick the venue? All these other
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel what I'm saying?
Oh, I totally do. And I try really hard to make sure that COVID doesn't take over the whole conversation. I mean, there are some couples where we've gotten to a point where like, that's all we can talk about because I'm going through like second, third postponements right now. But like just the other day, I met with a couple, and it was the first time we'd met in person because everything was over Zoom and phone calls before, and we're approaching their wedding day in May, and we just sat down and just pretended that COVID didn't exist for a minute. We're at Twin Sisters Brewing. It's like the best place ever if you haven't been. And we talked about how they met. We talked about their love story and their plans for after the wedding and what they want to do. And I just really want to help my couples focus on their marriage and not just the wedding, because isn't that what almost everybody does? They're like, oh, the cake and the flowers and all this stuff. And then you get married and you're like, oh, we like have to be husband and wife now. Like we got to figure this out. And it's a huge shock. And so I want to help, I don't know, just start conversations in a sneaky way, not a creepy way. Get them to focus on that.
Our couple on Friday, we just had this tiny little wedding, and they were so young, and and sometimes you meet them and you're like, God, whether like you said, we're playing this way, and then during their vows, they were talking about how they've been together 10 years and they met in high school and whatever. And I'm like, wow, I was like, okay, that's a horse of a different color, right? Because you do start where you're like, man, and it's COVID and all this other stuff.
Yeah,
and, oh my God, I just want the best for everybody. And I mean, I want them, but then they're like, oh, we had our first date back and we couldn't even drive or whatever the hell it was, and you're like,
Mom dropped us off at Chuck E. Cheese.
I feel good about that, right? Because it's like I said, it used to be even on the wedding days, you could really spend time with the couples and see their interactions and stuff. And everything right now is like so stilted, and we're covered and we're in different things and all that. Like, because that used to be my favorite part of the day, is coming home and being like, man, that was like watching, we all just had a good time hanging out. And now it's like, it is more, it does feel more like work now than it ever has.
There's just so much more you have to monitor now. I mean, like I've lost track of like what documents came out, but in one of them it talks about like every professional at the wedding has to have a COVID ambassador. I don't know, like, so like for me, like technically I should be having an assistant there just monitoring to make sure that I'm following COVID It's crazy, but they said that if it's just you, then that's fine as well. But yeah, it feels more like, all I have to say is I give major kudos to people that are still having their weddings right now, because with everything else that's kind of overshadowing it, and just like, what rules do we have to follow? And like, oh, better not step out of that 6-foot gap. And it's just a lot. Yeah. So, but I'm happy to see people are still getting married. It's every wedding I had last year that went from big to small and just like had to adjust their plans 50 different times within a month. They ended on a smaller guest count, a more simplified day. And they're like, you know what? We would do it all over again that way if we had to do it. And so I've been just taking that feedback and trying to help my current couples when they're like, oh, do we postpone to 2022? And it's like, just get married. Go start your life. Have fun.
I just had an email over the weekend about that, and their concern was, even if they push to next year, what's it gonna, what is that gonna feel like? It's gonna feel like your wedding day. I mean, whatever it is, whatever it looks like. I mean, I feel like, everyone. I think, I don't know. It's interesting, and this is probably a topic of discussion for our wedding planning podcast. But I do think that I think wedding, not all couples, but I think most or all wedding vendors, we have all very much changed our perspectives on everything a million different times in the last year. And I feel like a lot of couples haven't, like, they're like, they still want, like, we're all doing all these juggling acts to get to where we can do it. And they're like, well, no, this is what I want, but this is what I want. It's like, okay, well, no, but I think both sets of us, we all need to adjust everything. Where I do feel like the vendors are jumping through hoops and the couple's like, well, no, I still want 200 people on the open dance floor.
Yeah. Yeah. I got an inquiry about a month ago for like a 350 person wedding this August. And I was already booked, but I just wanted to write back and be like, you do realize this is probably not going to happen. And it's so sad because like you want to be hopeful. And I think that's been one of the hardest pieces of COVID, especially in Washington. Like there's just no, like, here's a little bit of hope. There's something you can look for. And it's just been sitting and waiting. Like you don't know what's going to happen next week. And so you want to be hopeful and you want to be encouraging, but you also have to kind of be the bad guy because you're the one that knows the restrictions. You're the one that knows kind of what to expect. And I joined the Washington State Wedding and Event Advocates group a few months ago, which is how I met Greg. And that has been hugely eye-opening and very educational. And I feel like it's, given me a little bit of insight that I can help my couples with, but it's also made me realize like you can't have 350 people. Like you're not going to have the mosh pit dance floor. It's just not going to happen. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the most important thing to you? And going back to the core of that day, like I said before, like what is this day about? It's about your marriage and celebrating. You can do that. Just maybe not in a foam pit party or whatever you guys want to do.
One more thing on this, and I want to move on. I had a call this week from a mother for like a live stream or whatever, and she was she was trying to tell me about like all the regulations. She's like, I'm like, please tell me more about what's going on right now, please.
Yeah.
She's like,
which document are you reading?
She's like, did you know that you can't even do? I'm like, yes, I literally have spent 2 hours on a Zoom call with Greg of the, that they talk with the government. I mean, please tell me more about the regulations that I have lived with every day for the last year and a half. Like, please, I really do appreciate you telling me about that.
Yeah, like I haven't known for the last year and followed it. That's one of the things that they're trying to work on is a lot of the counties, because like you got your state and then your county, and counties put their things in place and that overrides what the state does. And so a lot of people will be like, oh, Washington opened up. And when King County and whatnot went into phase 2, everyone's like, oh, we can do this. But King County still had restrictions on wedding. And, oh, yeah, it is. It's a lot to keep up with.
I want to hear about, starting this business now and obviously, you've been married, you know about the wedding stuff, learning stuff, being, entrepreneur, self-employed that way, harder than you thought it would be. I mean, COVID aside, harder than you thought it would be the last 3 years, easier than you thought it would be. How did that process go? Obviously pandemic aside.
Man, gosh, I feel like I'll answer one way and then I'll think of all the reasons why I need to answer the other way. It's like I said before, the 2 jobs that I had before this for those is about 2.5, 3 years in each job. And I feel like each of those taught me really helpful things. Probably what I have a hard time with is, I wouldn't say like time management, but like with my husband's work schedule, like he's a big outdoors guy. Like we love to hike, fish, camp, hunt, like whatever. So if he's like, hey, it's really nice, let's go for a hike. And if I have on my schedule, like a day of batch work I should be doing, we're like, oh yeah, it is nice, let's go. And so like I'll always get the important stuff with my clients done. That's first and foremost, but it's all the back end stuff, like keeping up with a blog and like posting on Instagram. Like that has been the hardest thing because I mean, some people live and die on social media and I just, I can't, it's hard. And I mean, wedding planner aside, like just as a human being, I fall into that comparison trap. And so when you have to constantly be posting on social media and being present and having a face, that's been probably the hardest thing. And so, but there's tools out there that help with that. And that's been tremendous for me, but definitely like keeping up on the back end of stuff, like getting my rentals up. I've had so many of these things for so long, but I'm like, I got to take the pictures and I got to upload and edit and type out the description. Like how many times can you explain a cake stand to somebody? So yeah, it's all the back end stuff, all the not fun stuff.
So are you going to transition more into rentals and design stuff as well? Or has that always been kind of a part of it?
It's, so the rentals I just launched a couple weeks ago. They're going to stay exclusive to my couples for now. I don't think I would be able to balance like having a wedding on one day to deliver rentals and then the same wedding that day. So it'll be exclusive to my couples, but I really do want to incorporate more design work into what I offer. So if somebody books me for something, I want that to just be part of the package. Right now I'm just offering it a la carte because not everybody wants it. Like most people in the Northwest are like, wood round, flowers, votives, and like that's it. But things that I want to really specialize in are like decorating your head table or your sweetheart table, or putting together your ceremonies, like more of those little, not just your centerpiece that multiplies by however many tables, but kind of the bigger pieces, your dessert table, just making it a little bit more elegant, leveling it up a bit with bigger rental pieces, more unique things that, you're not going to find just at any old store. So yeah, hopefully, I mean, we'll see where it goes. Right now, I have a lot of brides that are interested in what I have, but we'll see what happens.
Where does that love of design come from?
Oh gosh, working at Pier 1. And I've always loved decorating. Like when I was a little kid, my parents were ready to toss me out the window, but I would rearrange my bedroom like every 4 weeks. I'm like, ooh, how can I like angle my bed in a certain way? Like, how can I put this bookshelf? And so I loved organizing. I loved the rearranging and just finding new ways to maximize a space. And then I worked at Pier 1 for about 6.5 years, just on and off seasonally. And I went there straight out of college because didn't know what I was going to do. And I loved it. I mean, both of my managers that I went through, they like, one went to design school and the other one was just incredibly good at it. And so that got me really interested in being able to like, I don't know, learn about like the rule of heights and the rule of threes and the odd numbers. And I love it. There's one thing I'm incredibly passionate about outside of this. It's decorating, design. Yeah, it's so much fun.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, because as a planner, there's a bunch of different, factors where obviously you need someone that's, detail oriented and then,
Mhm.
time management. But I do think that design thing, I mean, it's a lot
Yeah,
of different, it's a lot of aspects you're trying to put together into one,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Versus like, I mean, you can be a photographer and be good with, details and whatever, but like you don't have to see the whole, as like a planner, you got to see the whole day
yeah,
and then the minutia
right,
and then the
right.
design and keeping everyone track and like dealing with relations between the families. I mean, there's a lot of, do you feel like there's a lot of balls to juggle sometimes?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's just and especially like I had this one of my younger couples, they booked me and then threw one of my design packages on as well. And like that, like you talk about all the different things to juggle. Like the bride was like, I don't really care. Like I just want to get married. Like throw a lantern on the table and call it a day. But the mom had been saving like juice bottles from Hawaii for a year. I mean, the mom was really involved in the decorating. And so they both had two different visions. So that was probably like the trickiest place to be in because again, like I want to be an advocate for the couple, especially for the bride if she has a certain vision. And her vision was like, I don't care, just like put a couple lanterns out. And so trying to balance both of their preferences and helping with that was a lot.
We just had a wedding and I had heard from all the vendors that the mother was the most, that was who we were all working for, and she was very nice as well. And so was the
Totally.
daughter and
Yeah.
everybody was really nice, but it was really like the same thing. She just wanted to get married, but I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a thing nowadays. And I've talked about this a ton on here, but when I felt like before everything went awry,
Hmm.
we were booking a lot of, big weddings, long hours, lots of things, and the couples
Yeah.
were losing a little bit of steam, right? Because it was social norms that you had to go this long or the family wanted it or all this different
Right.
stuff. And, I had hoped that with everything, going smaller a little bit, that maybe we would be able to focus more on what the couples really wanted, right? But it does seem like
Yep.
regardless,
Yep.
the family's still going to have, even if it's a smaller wedding, the family's going to have as much say just on that 4 hours as they would on the
Oh,
big one. So
yeah. It's funny. I mean, going back to that whole book idea, like maybe throw in a chapter about like how to mom because or like how to like insert whatever family member or like very important person in your life and that you like I just want to tell parents like you will be more helpful to your kiddos if you can just be
oh,
like
boy.
what can I do for you? Or like, how are you doing? Or like, take them for a pedicure, take them for a cup of coffee, like do something that's not wedding. And I think, and a lot of people, well, rewinding, I think when I have a tough dynamic with a family member and the couple, I always have to go back to where are their intentions. And it's simply to make sure that this person's wedding day is perfect. And so when you go back to that, like, you know where they're coming from, it makes it like, that's how you deal with it. And that's, you can get on board with that. Everybody wants a good wedding day for them. But yeah, leading up to it, it's like, you just want to tell them, just don't talk weddings and just go do something else. And you will be way more helpful than like trying to shove 30 different design ideas down their throat. So yeah, maybe I'm going to write that down. Put a chapter in there.
It's so hard. Yeah. I mean, you want that and what you didn't have or what you learned from. And, you know, it's all that family stuff or what your sister had or what your brother had or what I mean, it's all these different things. And, you know, combined with everything going on now, I mean, it is really hard to balance all that. I mean, you know, even COVID aside, I mean, it's very difficult to get married, I think, in society nowadays with just there's a lot of expectations, you know?
Yeah. Shameless plug. So one of my services, like talking about the standards and expectations and whatever. So like one thing that I had noticed when I was planning my wedding was hopping on the knot. Cause like, it's like, oh, I finally have a rite of passage into the knot. So I made an account and I got all gung ho about it. And then when it said like, create your planning timeline, it had crap in there that had nothing to do with my wedding. And so I'm like going through and spending more time, like deleting the items that had nothing to do with what I wanted. And then like same thing on Pinterest. If you just like type in like, 8-month wedding planning timeline, a lot of things on there that didn't apply to what I wanted. And so when I was thinking through my services, I thought, gosh, why not be the knot for somebody? And so for a couple that really wants to do a lot of the planning themselves, they're confident talking to vendors, they have the time, they know how to research, have a general idea of what they want, but they don't understand how your budget affects who is a tangible option for you, or like, I want this design, but the person that I want for photography doesn't meet that kind of style or whatever. So it's like a start and finish type package where set you up on a budget. We go through your budgeting style. I feel like there's 3 different ways people budget for a wedding. Either have your overall number, 30 grand, 100 grand, whatever, or they have like a categorized overall number. They've done their research. They have an idea of like, okay, a good videographer, you know, like 5 grand. That's, you know, like that'll get me a really good, I mean, at least I think, good options there. And then there's also like values-based budgeting. And when my husband and I were planning our budget out, we were like, okay, 3 grand for a photographer. That'll be good. We met our photographers and we're like, take all of our money. Like, we love you. And so we were fine going above budget because we saw so much value in that. And so I helped the couple figure out their budget style, help them just figure out their vision of what they want. And then I help them prioritize. Like, some people, like, food is number one. They're like, we don't care if our pictures suck. We just want lobster. So, you know, so we'll prioritize.
And those people are wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right.
People, you will never remember what you ate on your wedding day. No, I'm kidding.
Seriously though. So like through all of that, I will create this document for them with all of the different recommendations in each category, for like, you know, photographer, caterer, all of it. And I vet them. I make sure that they're available. So then that way the couple isn't like, hey, Reed, are you free on my day? My wedding planner sent you. And you're like, no, sorry. That sucks. Like, to be constantly contacting people and they're not available. So give you that, help you with your budget tracker. And then I give you a planning timeline based on all the things that you have already done that you have to do based on your vision. And it's been so helpful for people. And so that's my middle package that I'm trying to really show the world that, like, this is a good way to go. Like, day of coordinating is great, but if you're just really lost, like, and you don't need a full service planner, you can still get all that help that's personalized, customized, takes all the guesswork out.
I love that because I know exactly the knot thing I know, like, when you I was like, I know exactly what that looks like because we had a planner, but we made the knot thing for the website, and, you know, to get like the couple's website, you know, where people could, you know, whatever RSVP or whatever. But I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. So
I feel like one of the items was like something about buying doves for the ceremony. I'm like, I'm not getting doves. Why is this on here? Oh man. Yeah. There's a lot of information out there. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
It is overwhelming.
This has been so fun. I'm so glad
Yeah,
that you could come on and that we could
thank
connect.
you.
I love meeting new voices and new people on here, especially on the Get to Know Your Wedding Pro side. So thank you for that. If people want to learn more about you and all your services and everything else, and where would you have them check out?
So I'm on Instagram, Evergreen Wedding Planning. My website is An Evergreen Wedding. There's a photographer couple, I think like in Connecticut, that's Evergreen Weddings. And so like they always come up and people think I'm a photographer. So I'm not. I am an Evergreen Wedding Planning or an Evergreen Wedding. And yeah, Facebook, Instagram, you can just call me and we can talk. Told you I'm a people person, but yeah, on those places. And if anybody even just wants to talk about weddings, that's what I want a lot of people to know is like I'm fine dishing out 10 minutes of my time if you just have a question to ask, but you don't want to hire me. Like I said, I just want to be helpful, want to make the day perfect for you. So however I can do that.
I think that's good. Yeah, I think that is what we are trying to build with these podcasts, are people that are interested in education and building a
Yeah, yeah.
community. So I do. I
No,
appreciate that. I think that that's great.
you're doing good work, Reed.
We're trying. If you are like Lacey, you're interested in coming on the podcast, you can go to bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest. And that's a nice, easy questionnaire that we have to get you in the system. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thanks so much.